Chip Cheerio. Alright, I wanted to stream for a while Utopia stuff for fun, if nothing else. So I figured where better to start than looking at changes. Everyone likes changes. I like to consider myself smarter than other people, and so everyone will want to listen to what I said. So, age 96, we're going back to personalities. We're losing the half blood, true blood. We're also bringing back undead, which will make some people happy. We're losing halflings, which will make some people unhappy. First, and one of the biggest mechanic changes will be losing O-spec converts. Now, this affects everyone, especially in the first 2 weeks or so of the age, and it affects everyone in different ways. It's going to affect your pump throughout the age, because every elite you get, every stage of the age, kind of stays with you all age long. Even when you get changed, you only lose half your elite. You get Night Strike, you lose 20% of your elite. But that means, when you convert for 1,000 elites in the first day of the age, we have 500 of those after War 2, and 300 of those left after War 3. So every elite, in much the same way wizards and science do, it's an age-long process of building elite. Now, if you're really big, aimed really deep, they don't stick around as much. But I think you're going to see people coming out of your first end of war ceasefire to down 2 or 3 EPA just because they're so used to having those few free elites at the start. It changes how certain races can be played. When you have a defensive elite, like on Fairy and Elf, you're playing a very different style when you have converts. You're sort of looking to hit hard early, and then your defense is rising as other people's defense or offense is falling. And so you get into this sort of pseudo unbreakable point after a couple waves. Usually you're backing that up with decent WPA, and that sort of lets you become like an economic, hard to fireball turtle prov. Now, when you don't have O-spec convert, you're actually a better attacker because you fizzle out all your offense on converts, but it does change your styles for that sort of play. It means you do want to pump elites more. You don't get that sort of half power. O-specs are 10, elites are 15, but you're going to convert half your O-specs over time, so they're kind of like 12. But when you don't have that, it does make you weaker. So in general, you're going to spend more time on banks. You might change the way you draft. You might draft a little less deep so you can afford more elites. So it's a pretty big mix up to the game, but I think it mostly affects your first 3 weeks. Once you have a few end of war ceasefires, then generally you're having all the elites you want. So it really depends the kind of wars you have, the kind of group. I certainly war people at the end age that have half O-spec stuff, so not for everyone. Force ceasefire is 3 months. I think that's good. 3 days is enough time to actually prepare a little bit more if you want to like get back at the guy, like get waived at 120%, you force ceasefire, you can grow and come back at them in 3 days. 2 days, it's a little bit short for doing much. You're also getting rid of force ceasefire out of war range. We'll see how that works in these other mechanics. If you force ceasefire well in war range, that's land and net worth within 85 to 117%, you're going to be giving your kingdom honor to the person you ceasefire against. And they'll get 1 war win. So 1 war win point, I think the current system starts everyone at 10, and you're averaging maybe about +5 by the end of age per war win. it starts off lower, but they get more valuable over time, especially if you're warring in the top 10. We'll just say a proper war gives you 5 war win points. And so, you get a fifth of a war win when somebody dodges you. A lot of people in change channels have been saying that's going to be a big deal. People are going to farm out like this. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I think it's just going to balance the scales a bit. And that's being paid. So you're actually taking the war win point from them. So when you're just looking at the person trying to get ahead, you're only getting 1 point, 20% of a war win. It's not huge. But if you're forcing somebody who's above you in war win to give you that point, then it becomes 40% of a war win, and that's a little bit more valuable. So you can actually target people ahead of you to go up the rank. And then if you aggressor force ceasefire in range, which means I wave you, I'm war size, you don't do anything back to me, and then after 24 hours of no hits, I can aggressive force ceasefire. The same effect will happen with honor and war win points, but also the defender, the person I waved, is going to lose 5% of their total honor. And that's just because you've got an extra bit of time in that scenario where you could have forced ceasefire yourself and you chose not to. So it's mostly a penalty for just hanging in there and causing grief without fighting back. A little bit more war win books when you win. I don't think that makes a huge difference, but people who like science are just going to be happy. And I think in general, giving more benefits to warring is nice, because I want more wars to happen. So this is a big, big change for war. No more draft speed, no more build time, no more train time in your wars. Bonuses to those. So the draft speed doesn't come in hugely into play in war. There's not a lot of drafting happening in war. It will make drafting either slower or more expensive. Those are sort of synonymous. It's not like you're drafting emergency in war. So if you want the same amount of soldiers, you're going to be paying more for them, or you're just going to get them a little bit slower. Not a lot of draftings happening after your first 2 wars. Depends on the setups. Until later war, I don't think that has a big effect on war itself, but it will in end of war ceasefire. The build time will affect both. The 25% build time made it so your land was always done between waves, and unless you were super duper fast. There hasn't been a lot of super duper fast options recently. And so that being removed means unless you run 0 racks, your land's never built quite for your wave. And that makes you kind of 10% weaker each wave as an attacker. Your credits, you get a few more racks in, a few TG, few GS here and there. It's not a huge deal, but it's 5 or 10% here and there things. So it does make you weaker primarily as an attacker. Also, when rebuilding your watchtowers, with current build times being around 9 ticks in war, double timed watchtowers are done in 4 ticks. That's pretty fast. Now a double timed watchtower is done in 6 ticks, where your regular timed watchtowers are in 12 ticks. And that gives you a lot more opportunity to assassinate wizards at PM that you're trying to drive down, or do more night strikes before you have to sit and recharge and get that stealth you need to GA again. So I think it's mostly a nerf to attackers in war. It's a little bit of a nerf to mystics or buff to rogues. Train time. I know some people that really like train time in war. Me, it doesn't matter that much. There's very few situations where there's significant train times training happening in war, so I don't really care if my credits train 25% faster. Some may disagree, but I don't even see many credit speeds. But there are some situations where you dump in a whole bunch of D-spec credits, and them being done quick can help you, stop a few hits on you, maybe get unbreakable, at least to a position you're not going to be dechained. It probably mostly sucks for chains that want to get in some defense, but it's not a big deal. I think all three of these changes are primarily focused on your end of war ceasefire. So, what is your standard train time? Let's just look this up. Let's go to Wiki. We'll find these things. Might find them slower than I want to. Training. Well, that's not good. Units. Draft rate. Training cost. Training time. So your base time's 24 ticks. I guess I knew that already. And your only bonus is really going to be Inspire Army, Obedient, Valor Science. So maybe it's a buffed Valor Science. So I do believe if we look at rituals as well, train times removed. So you're looking at 18-hour train times in End of War Ceasefire as opposed to stacking War and Expedient closer to 10, 11, 12. So if you have to train 8 hours sooner, that generally means you're drafting 8 hours sooner. Because most people, they want everything trained by the time they ceasefire. And that means you have 8 hours less of max income. 8 hours in the span of 4 days is almost 10% of your income. Now you look at build times. When you're building at the construction times also changed. So with Expedient, your build time's still lower. That's fine. But at the very start of End of War Ceasefire, all your buildings are going to come in 3 hours later. That your banks are coming in. Your guilds, powers are coming in. So that's another, 5-10% less money you're going to span a full End of War Ceasefire. And 2 ticks as well or so at the end of it when you're rebuilding war. Now, draft speed, I'm not sure exactly what draft speed's going to come out as, because if people are going to be poorer in that they have less starting elites, they have to draft sooner, they have to train sooner, their builds are slower, you are expecting to train less. So in some ways, you might end up drafting at the same time, even with a draft reduction, just because that's sort of how it lines up with your expected gold. But how does drafting work? You draft 1.5% of your peasants times patriotism times affluent, unless they change that as well. Draft speed from affluence removed as well. You're looking at 50% difference or so. Like that's just your base draft right now. Anyway, 30% of 1.5%. You're drafting just drafting 2% per tick instead of 2% times your affluent times war bonus. You're used to be drafting more than 50% faster. Currently, you'd be drafting at 3.1% with patriotism, affluent. It's an overpassenger affluent, it's going to be a little bit higher. And you're looking at 1.9% now. So the way I check things when I want to see how long it's going to take, this is my draft rate. It's 98.1, because every tick, that's how many of my peasants I still have left. Maybe not the best way to do it. So if I draft for 48 hours, I have 40% of my peasants. So you start End of War Ceasefire at 20 PPA, you draft for 48 hours, and then you train. Now you're down to 8 PPA. That's pretty reasonable. That's how most End of War ceasefires look, I think, even across the whole age, at least for attackers. So you're going to need to draft for 48 hours to get to 8 PPA. Now you also need to train 18 hours early. Suddenly, 66 ticks, that only gives you 30 hours of income before you have to train. But now your build times are also 12 ticks instead of 8 ticks in war. Now you're only really getting 18 hours of full income if you want to draft to 8 PPA. That's really rough for people. That's not what people are used to. You're used to drafting, say, at, you do that, used to be, you could draft at 30% peasants in only 36 ticks. 36 ticks with a 12-hour training and an 8-hour starting build. Yeah, that's 40 ticks of max income before you draft, and you're drafting deep. So you could potentially see people with less than half the gold, and I don't think people realize that just from the changes. A lot of people are talking like, oh, 20% here and there. It's just drafting. It's just build times. It's just training times. In their head, that just means 3 hours earlier with all the exact same gold. No, there's a good chance if you don't make adjustments that you're going to have half the gold. It's a really big difference. That means you're going to have a lot of specs. If you're going to have elites, you're not going to be converting those specs. So I wanted, to spend the majority of time with this first video on these changes, really focusing on this part so people can prepare themselves and think about the changes in this way and what they can do to combat that. Maybe you don't release your specs, at least not early age. Maybe you're building extra homes to draft more, you're really capping out your banks, or maybe you go the opposite. You're purposely going to play a spec heavy style, and your End of War ceasefires pumping more guilds, cities, and just saying, hey, you're going to be underdrafted, you're not going to have many elites anyways, I'm just going to be stronger this way. So that's my message to people on that. Intel. This is really nice. Reducing the difficulty to gather intel while you're in End of War ceasefire. I don't know about the rest of you. I really like getting intel on people all the time, just to see what's up, just to see what they have, scout them out for war. And I also, maybe like or unlike you guys, have a lot of wars where I end up with thieves afterwards. It's really difficult to even just do simple intel on people. And then they can turn around, they can get full WPA counts of you because you're all sitting at, 0.5 TPA after losing your war. And intel is really important when it comes to preparing, thinking, and knowing what the potential is for your opponents. So, that was one benefit people maybe had not being in End of Fire. So I think that's just a good quality of life change. Crystal Ball reduced to 1 mana. I think people have been asking for that for a while, and I think that makes sense. Remember, UCB to get rogue intel in war. If you're a core, don't waste your thieves. You don't need to. UCB. Rituals. So rituals are all the same, except Godspeed got a slight attack speed buff. Affluent lost the draft speed, Expedient lost the train time, and Thief training. I went over that a bit. I didn't mention the Thief training, but it means you're going to spend an extra 100 GC acre for every 1 TPA you got to train. Yeah, that might eat in another 10% into your gold stacks or 5% of your gold stacks. A lot of small compounding things. Now, correct me if I was wrong. I believe Havoc was 30% before. I think that might just be a mistake that it's lowered to 20%. I don't think it needs to be 20%. I think it's really fine at 30% without the damage buffs. But just the attack time. So this last age, I really liked Onslaught. Wages are a big part of war play at the top. Nobody's holding on to peasants. Everyone's getting fireballed, greeted, and everyone's drafting really deep, and everyone has a lot of elites. So wages are really big. And if you're lowering wages while your opponent isn't, your opponent's going to win. So I thought Onslaught in general was probably one of the strongest writs of the age for general use. Godspeed had its purpose. Godspeed was really good if you wanted to counter people's orcs. There was a lot of glass cannon builds this age with just a lot of really hard hitting attackers that just blitz your TMs. If you use a big Godspeed because you don't need the offense as much, you can blitz their orcs. You can get that extra chain in on them and save your TMs a little bit faster. That's how I thought about using Godspeed this age. Expropriation was really good for the first few wars. Still stacking with all the orcs on the servers was scary strong. Credits are kind of useful at the start and then never again. And there's a lot of honor to farm at the start of the game. Everyone starts off like 2,000 honor. You get to hit everyone a lot. It's a really good way for your TMs to get in some early honor. I quite liked Expro. I never used it again. Stalwart. I thought Stalwart was really strong. Having some minus casualties goes a long way when you're facing a lot of kill buffs. And this age, I think everyone agreed, mostly very difficult to get pure def TMs. And I think running Stalwarts was a way to try and secure your TMs. Everyone has defense. If you're running, I explain to people like this: if you're an attacker with 6 D-specs per acre, you've got 60 raw defense. If you run Stalwart and 7 D-specs per acre, that's 7.7 effective D-specs per acre. That's 77 DPA. 77 over 60 is a 30% defense. That's 30% less hits your core is taking in a trade. And all it cost you was a ritual that mostly helps your TMs. Apparently helps your cores a lot too. You just add one extra D-spec in. It goes a long way. And you can push that further. You can specs per acre. You can run a couple forts in there. And when you have the minus casualties as well, your defense isn't disappearing quite as fast in the chains. And you can really cut down on enemy hits. So I think that's the style you want if you're running Stalwart. Barrier, I don't see Barrier being used much in general. I think if you're in a situation where you're getting offed that much and you need to slow it down, the best way to slow it down is to hit their TMs. So run an onslaught. Amnesia, accessible battle races. I thought it was already, so that's good, I guess. And Tree of Gold rune cost went up. Not something that matters a lot. Tree of Gold's dirt cheap, even at double cost. I don't think anyone's gonna have problems. So we'll go on to races. I might come back to rituals once we go over the race changes and see how they'll apply to the future age. I mostly talked about rituals in the last age. And so go to races. Avian. All right, we're back. There. Food. moving on to races. Avians, we've got a 20% attack time buff. That's better than most recent ages. 20% birth rate, a little bit lower than some ages. Horses are only at 1 offense. Your regular horse is at 2 offense. Mostly makes horses in stables not viable. If you have really, really bad BE, then stables would still be better than PGs for avians, but I don't think you're playing around. I think you're just building other buildings. I guess it opens the road for avian road rob horses, even if they don't really use them, at least it's an option for them. You have one higher O spec. Spec base is 1010. They get the +1 O spec. So still worse than a mounted O spec in other races, though if you mount it yourself, it's better. And a 13-4 elite at 1200. So they do have the cheapest elite this age. You're looking at elites from 1200 to 1500. So at best, it's 20% cheaper. On average, it's 10% cheaper than most races. Now, 13-4, in terms of defense, it's sort of middle of the road for defensive elites this age, or defense on offensive elites this age. It will add a significant amount of defense. It might even almost double your defense if your elites are sitting home. 13 attack is not very high, especially in an age with a lot less elites in general. The less elites you have, generally the more defense you're going to run. A lot of attackers run sort of suicide offense and low defense because all the other attackers have so much offense. Even if they had 50% more defense, they're still getting pounded so hard and so fast that they as well just had more offense and hit more while they could. When everyone's offenses are kind of pulled down by 20% or so, then building more D-specs actually lowers the amount of hits a lot. You can get into a position where you can only really 1 and 2 times each other. So avians are going to struggle with that 13 elite. It's only a little better than other people's mounted O specs. For that, you're only really getting attack time. So I think avians are going to be in a position where they want to play with Nightmare, most likely, so they can get those hits in, lower defenses, and then utilize that attack speed more. With a cheaper elite, maybe focusing on O-specs more, they can pump more wizards. When you have high wizards, that birth rate is worth more because it's harder to keep spells on you. So Avian's going to struggle quite a bit with their offense, but I like the idea of them. When you have no stables, you have a lot, and probably not racks, have a lot of buildings you can put in that can have really high watchtowers, really high guard stations, really high hospitals, really high TG. Most attackers can only have medium of those things, or only 3 out of 4. So avians do work out in that way. Dark Elf. So Dark Elf's definitely going to be changed by revised or finals. Their benefits are just not worth what they get, what they have. Birth rate penalties are really, really harsh on anyone who is attacking or gaining land or otherwise losing pop space. Even if it's just 15%, it's tough. It's really tough to exist with that. Most birth rate penalties you see have been 30% in the past. So maybe 15% is not as bad, and it won't be a huge issue. But generally, when I see a birth rate penalty, I'm thinking, I want that to be an unbreakable who's not getting fireball. And when you see from their military, base specs, and a 12-6 elite. So their elite is the lowest offense of any of the attacking elites. It's got a higher defense portion, which is nice if you're keeping the elites home for defense, but not really why you have attacking elites. And that defense also adds quite a bit of net worth to them, makes them easier to chain. And what do they get for that? They get cheaper thieves, 20% cheaper thieves. So you'll save 100 gold per acre for every EPA you train in End of War Ceasefire. Nice, I guess. It's really not enough to do much. In war, you're not training thieves. Out of war, you're saving a bit of gold. And 15% spell damage, which is, it's like having half an extra mana. Having more mana is okay, but it's not the be all end all, especially when it's only half of a mana. Means when you land 6 fireballs, it's like you landed 7. It's nice, but it's also not helping your duration spell. So you're really only focused on fireball and Good Night. No other spells really working with that. I think even Blandlust and Tornado both don't actually work with spell damage. Could be wrong on Tornado. I think it's been confirmed. So expect a change or quite a big buff to Dark Elf. I suggested maybe they get like prisoner converts back. We've seen that in past ages. I don't know what they're going to do with it. Maybe we lower their elite cost a lot. Make their elite 600 or 800. They've got the worst elite, and they don't have much going for them. Give them a really cheap elite. Make them like an old school halfling. Just my thoughts. As is, no reason to pick a Dark Elf. Can't play it as a TM to use those two benefits very well. You're going to be a really bad attacker, and being able to fireball okay when chained isn't really worth all those. Me. Oh, Elf is bumped up to a 30% WPA. Very strong, 25% runes. You're using that in war and out of war. Some benefits when it comes to buildings is tower benefits. You're only using in war or out of war. Only a few buildings you're running in both. So a rune production bonus is worth a lot more than other buildings. So I really like that. In war, you're looking at, up to 5% free land, same as End of War Ceasefire. Maybe it's a little less good out of war. Doesn't break the bank, but if you're also running high production, you're stacking all those benefits together. Penalty, minus 15% sabotage damage. It hurts. I ran L's this age, and I noticed it a lot, the damage reduction. It really slows down things. Minuses to this sort of stuff hurt more than pluses help, unless you're stacking lots of pluses, but how it is. So, slows down your robbing, slows down kidnaps, but mostly it slows down your night strikes. Or if you're running an elf rogue, it's going to slow down your greater arson, your fascinating wisdom quite a bit. Now, you can live with it. It's not, certainly doesn't stop you from being a thief, but it just slows you down. Like having one less elf when you do a thief from PM. Elites are 612, so as a TM elf, you're going to be hoping for your elite defense. That's going to be quite hard to get this age. I'm going to expect a lot of this age. So, as a TM, maybe expect to run quite a few D-specs throughout the age if you want to go the defense route. And then if you are hybrid attacking with O-specs, you're not getting those converts in. So you'll keep some more offense, but you're probably going to want to have higher starting to weather the storm. Overall, super good pick for magic things. And See how it does. As hard as it is to train those alpha elites, everyone else is going to be struggling to train their offensive elites. So, you sort of have a balance. It might actually be easier to run spec defense as a TM and still get unbreakable than it is elite defense in other ages. Dwarf, 20% BE, 25% construction time, 100% extra food. Now, most people pump econ science early, they get that production early, and food penalty is only worth like minus 4% per week. It's not a big. And when you have your build efficiency, basically just a hit on that. So IBE is really, really strong. One of the tools in the whole game for running front, especially as an attacker, especially as a rogue. And your BE is over 100, your buildings are. Additionally, we've seen a lot of dwarves where they have near maximum guard stations. They've also had the mist spell recently. They're just really brutal to take down. It's almost impossible to take down dwarves at the start of a war. Because they're BE high, you sort of have to leave them for wave 2 or 3 or 4. You wear them down with fireball, they're BE, then you chain them, break them. They don't have that free rebuild anymore, which is a big nerf to them. And I think that's warranted. I thought dwarf a bit in last age, especially in the later parts of the age, they had high D. But 20 BE is nothing to scoff at, and their elite is really reasonable at a 13.5. Construction time is playing in well in war, getting those buildings in on time again when other people aren't. You're saving a few hours on either side of end of war ceasefire, which contributes a lot to your income. And what did I say? You only had like 20 good ticks of end of war ceasefire as opposed to 40 maybe last age. When you can save 5 hours or 2 hours on that, that's a pretty significant bonus. So dwarf looking pretty strong. That elite is not bad at all. When you can add horses to that beat. Dryad, 25% income is huge. Free farms, basically by end of age. You don't need all early age, you just need a couple. You got 25% income and like 5 land. 15% attack time. It's pretty rough. That does cost you 10-12% barracks to run at regular time, or it's not the end of the world again, especially when there's so few really fast attackers in the last few ages. Everyone's running at base times. Running a little bit slower isn't horrid, but I think they're going to have a few issues, but that income is really going to help them push elites. And they've got the bonus to war horses as well. You're looking at a really strong elite at 17 mounted offense and stronger O specs. Attacking 10% slower when you have 10% more offense is a fair trade. That's sort of the trade between running onslaught and go. Like people think those are super imbalanced either. So I think Dryad's in a good position to just have a scary province hit me in the face. 2 elite defense is an issue. You're ambushed for almost free, and when you're hit home, it's going to be a lot easier to multi-tap you. With current meta, if you have 10 EPA and a lot of defensive on attacker elites has been 5 and 6 recently, you have oftentimes more than double your defense home with your, and it does stop people from doing too many multitasks. So when you have a low defense on the elite, you're prone to getting hit home and losing a lot of offense in front of those amps. So I think it'll be good in a spot when you can leverage that gold, when you have big size. You can really hit people hard at the start, sort of uh, just take them out on the onset of a war or an engagement, just waving for growth. I think they might struggle a little bit once they're worn down a bit. And you don't have any peasants and your elites aren't that high, you're just lower than everyone. Bonus. Fairy, 15% science effectiveness in arcane, a really, really strong bonus. By end of age, that's going to be worth 15% TPA, 15% WPA, minus 50% wizard losses. That's not a huge buff. It does give you like effectively 5 to 10% more WPA over the course of a war. Not terrible, but it's not break the bank. But the minus these losses, when you're playing some sort of hybrid, or even if you're a rogue that can't get max T, how many thieves you lose often determines how well your entire kingdom can go. You're unbreakable, but you can't maintain your thieves. That's a big, big deal. So minus thief losses is such a huge bonus. It really lends itself to those hybrid roles like your heretics, your mystics, and it does help your rogue roles as well. Minus 25% psi effectiveness for military. I don't think that matters a ton. It's going to be worth 5% defense by late age. You're going to be a little worse at slaying dragons, craft a little slower. Not not a big deal. I think it's sort of like having GP or not having GP. It's nice, but not going to be a huge deal. And their elite instead is at a 13 defense, at 1500 range. So it is more expensive, but it has more defense. So your highest defense is gonna be a well pumped fairy. I think overall fairy is looking your strongest all around TM, whatever path it chooses. It's super strong for attrition, and it's gonna have that TPA WPA bonus over other people. It won't be quite the wizard powerhouse an elf is, but in other does lose out that one offense on O specs, so it's going to be a little bit of a struggle early age. You want to hit stuff, and again, you have no converts. Many ages you run those hybrid fairies for a couple wars. They get their free elites. They're able to pump a lot of wizards and science early age. A lot of banks, just training specs. They get the free elites, and then they pump all their elites at once mid age. You can't just do that very easily. It's going to be an issue where you have to run D specs. You want to pump a lot of elites. You're not getting that science. You're not getting that wizards early. So see how that goes. Humans, 15% science efficiency. That's a lot. Just straight up, that's a really strong bonus. It helps everything all age long. Obviously, it scales. Well, maybe not obvious to everyone, but that sort of bonus scales with the age as your science becomes more and more what drives province. 10% dragon slaying strength, not worth a lot. Maybe you can build a specific human dragon slayer, pumping valor. Seen it done before quite effectively. So, yeah, why not? Nice little bonus. I don't think anyone's celebrating over it, but yeah, it's nice to have. Penalty minus 20% or plus 20% military wages. It can be really hard to deal with that, especially when humans are generally more pumped due to the science bonuses they have. But We've seen HI being more accessible in recent ages, and that can cut down a lot on wages. A province at 200% wages is acting as if it's 240% wages. You get greed on them, they're acting like 300% wages. It's really hard to keep that going. They don't have riot immunity either this age, so you slap a greed and riots on them, you fireball them a few times. They're really going to be asking for a lot of aid. However, recent ages, we've seen them with the WPA minus. They don't have anymore. Perhaps they're able to, with their science, and push that WPA a little bit harder to fireball. Other TMs are struggling to train elites. Maybe they have less wizards themselves. So you could see a position where a lot of core of this age are able to run a relative wizard strength that you haven't seen between core and mages. And it's harder to control your core, and that sort of bonus won't be as big an issue. They've got that 14 elite and 5 defense. I think that borders on your strongest attacker this age. That's really high offense. The defense on the elite makes it non-trivial to push. It's decent defense when it's sitting home. And that science bonus works in all aspects of your province all age long, on top of that really high power output when you have the elites. When you push econ science early age, which is normal for humans, you got that science bonus, suddenly start being the only one that can afford all those elites, and you've got one of the best elites. Like, that's the same elite that the Dryad has, 14 attack, but without that really low defense, and without an attack time penalty. So I think humans looking extremely strong. Orc. Orc's another race that's going to see changes by revised or finals. It's just in a really bad spot. It's got extra casualties. That's nice. Does a lot. But without good ways to stack kills, the benefit's not as good. Usually you see you've got bonus kills, and then maybe you've got bloodlust, and then maybe old onslaught was adding kills. You're not running as many expropriation rituals. They're not going to have bloodlust. So the casualties are nice, but it's not quite as it's not breaking the same eggs it used to. Minus training time. It is adding 3 or 4 ticks of income to your end of war ceasefire, which, as I've been saying, that's going to be worth maybe 10% of your gold if you plan things well. So it's not a terrible bonus, at least for next age. I think in ages past and current age, that's not really a bonus that I care for. Doesn't matter to me. But for next age, it's going to help a little bit. But penalty, no bonuses from honor. That's pretty sizable penalty. Baron honor, which is, I would say, what your average attacker has all the time. Maybe you spend more time at Noble Lady, but I think Baron is where you see people 3% pop, 6% OME, 6% income. Now, you don't have that income, there goes all the benefit in end of war ceasefire. 6% OME and 3% pop, just add that pop into your offense. 10% offense you're losing out on, and 10% gold you're losing out on. 10% WPA, 10% TPA. That's a lot of aspects to your province. That's like a lot of free science you're not getting. That's a lot of bonuses you're not getting. And people are so used to thinking that your honor doesn't matter on attackers because it's so low. And in some ways that's true, but you do miss it when you don't have it. And what do they have for all that? +1 elite. 15 instead of 14. That's what, 6% offense? That's the same offense that they're losing from not having Baron. And then with that 1 defense elite, sorry to say, you're getting bushed with soldiers at that point. And if you have to anon everything, what's the value? I mean, sure, anoning everything's fine if you don't have honor to use, but then you're just losing out on gains. Normally you have an orc with bonus gains, now you have an orc with minus gains. Like, you're not too happy. The only benefit I can see from this, they have a really low net worth elite since it has so low defense. In some situations, I'm sure someone can find a way to make that really valuable. It's going to be good at finishing chains. If it's your smallest land and their elites are low net worth, it means when it comes to finishing chains, you can bring people a lot deeper. So it's got good tactical value, but not really the be all end all of anything either. Undead. Undead have converts. No one else has converts. They also can't train elites. What this means is an undead is going to have the most science of anyone, the most wizards of anyone. They're going to be drafted the deep. They're going to have fine EPA just sitting around from converts. The minus casualties is nice. 20% is not huge. A 30% bonus I really like. A 20% I kind of don't notice. So I think Undead has a lot of potential if you can use your end of war ceasefires effectively to push your wizard and push your science. I think if you just sit there, have extra gold, and you aid it to people, and your province isn't doing anything special with it, you're going to suffer. Losing 10% defense on the D-spec, I do think kind of sucks. In the end, you just have to train one extra or have less defense. Not terrible. The elite's quite strong. You're not going to have many of them. You're probably only going to have 4 EPA sitting around, 6 if you are lucky. And even if you get chained, it's not like you magically keep only your elites with army out desertions. I think undead as is isn't weak. I don't think it's very strong either. I think it comes down to how you pump periods, and if it had plague, if it had no food, I think that would be steps to making it one of the strongest. But as is, it's just okay. It's doesn't really have the offense to compete with something like a human, and doesn't scale particularly well either on its own. But if you can make the wizards and science work for you, that'll be a plus. And last but not least, but literally least because they're short, gnomes. 15% population. That comes out to about 4 in the early age, and doesn't get to be a lot more in the later age. If you have a lot of science and honor, it does scale more. But say +4 early age, +5 mid to late age, +6 if you're a really high honor, like that population. So what I do when looking at a population bonus is if I want to look at an attacker, I say, okay, 100% of that population bonus is going into more defense, and everything else is the same. I have the same peasants, the same thieves, the same defense. Now I have an extra 4 O specs. That can be good, that can be not so good. So if you look at an attacker that says, say, runs 10 elites, 60 specs on average, your gnome is going to be running 14 O specs and 60 specs on. So with the elite offenses on most others, that comes out to a little bit higher or very average offense compared to other of the best attackers. It's on par with Dryad, it's on par with Human for offense, all else being equal. But it doesn't really have any bonus itself. Thieves with spec credits is a good gold benefit in End of War Ceasefire, especially if you win wars. In war, it can be quite useful. On its own, it doesn't do a lot. Your elite is useless, which is why I didn't mention it till now. You're going to train 0 of them, most likely. No access to hospitals. It can be a problem in some circumstances. In general, I think you can just live without hospitals as an attacker, and your life isn't terrible. Just focus on other things, having good OM, having good beat, and you can live without the hospitals. So similar to what I spoke about before with Undead and others, if you're running only specs, you have a lot more time to pump wizards, you have a lot more time to pump science, you have a lot more gold to help your kingdom with and end up with Ceasefire. You can draft deeper than other people and still train everything. So I think Gnome is at a spot where it can be as good as any other attacker, better, but not going to be fast like Avians. Not going to be the number one offense as a league. Has no real benefit to it other than just going to figure it out. So you got to make that work. If you're looking at Gnome from a PM perspective, in a similar way, I just look at what's it like to have +4 D spec. So I think Gnome will shine as a TM, especially because while your elves and your fairies think 30% banks just so they can train 6 EPA and then still have specs with it, you're going to be sitting on 17 D specs per acre, and you're going to have more defense than them. Run almost no banks while you do it. You're going to have more wizards, you're going to have more science, you're going to have more defense, you're going to have more thieves. You're going to be a really strong PM. Now, I think I prefer Gnome in a thief role or a heretic role more than the mystic because it has no built-in thief mitigation and no built-in WPA bonus. And mystics do get a lot of free wizards, so that free time that a gnome has in End of War Ceasefire is going to be less useful there. I think it's going to be maybe your strongest rogue of the age because it's going to have the highest WPA of any rogue in the age because of the pumping. It's going to get hit less. And I think similarly, it can run a pretty good heretic. But with heretic and mystic, I'd be a little bit worried about just maintaining your TPA. But if you can with either TDs or smart ops, I think it can shine there as well. I think your gnome rogues are looking pretty good. Got personalities. Personalities. So first off, we have the meme artisan, 20% capacity and production bonus on buildings. So this should affect everything with production or capacity, not just home stables dungeons. So it'll affect your base gold on banks, your farms, your towers. Does not affect guilds. A nice little bonus. Not always super easy to use. How many of these do you generally run in war? Well, you got a few farms, so it saves you 1% farm. Saves you 3% towers, saves you 2% stables, maybe saves you 2% homes, depending. So, it can be 10% land bonus situation. And while you're prepping, it might be worth more than that. But you have, but for End of War Ceasefire, it's not benefiting your guilds or your universities. Those are usually most of your land. In war, only tangentially helping. The main bonus it has, I think, meant to be its main bonus. 50% build time, 50% construction cost. Very valuable. This lets you, especially later age at bigger sizes, it's worth a ton of gold. Build time as well lets you sneak things in pretty quick. Great if you get waived, you can swap really quick. Ghost workers, it's worth like 5% BE is how I think about it. Another good bonus when you're stacking everything else, you're looking at 15% bonus land as a personality. You're saving a lot of extra gold, and your end of war ceasefires are going to be amazing. This tree of gold is worth a buttload of gold. If you don't know that, let me tell you, it's worth a buttload of gold. And in a situation where you have a longer drafting period and a shorter money making period of an end of war ceasefire, Tree of Gold's actually a lot stronger since you can cast your full 100% mana of Tree of Gold at your highest income. You get all of that bonus at once, and it doesn't really keep up. You really only need to do that one, and then you can just start drafting. So you can do your full Tree of Gold boost at like 24 hours in and just start drafting right away, swap your bank over. You already have enough gold to do whatever you want. So, Town Watch. I haven't found Town Watch particularly useful recently. I know back in the day it was like the strongest spell ever, but I don't care about it. That might just be me flat out wrong. And I could admit that if somebody smart just says, hey, Smiles, Town Watch is amazing, screw off. Well, you got me there, champ. So, 15% BE, but not really where you want it. And it's not really BE, it's build savings, which is different. It's sort of like being an avian and not having to build stables more than it's like having BE because of the way BE stacks. Having more BE is actually a lot stronger than having more build space. So 15% build space, you save a lot of gold, you save some hours in End of War Ceasefire with build time. You can do some fancy swaps with build time. Ghost Workers is actually buff. And then, I take it back. True Gold's probably the biggest buff it has. You're going to make probably double your End of War Ceasefire gold of anyone with just that one spell. Now, if everyone's an artisan, you can't cast rituals, and that can be. So your Tree of Golders aren't going to be casting writs. Keep that in mind. But, my first read through of this, I thought it was pretty weak. But doing a bit more math through what to expect in End of War Ceasefire, I could see your artisans actually comes to elites. Then you can probably sit on your pure elites with quite a few homes, maintaining your BE. And when it's time to go, you can swap your builds quite cheaply and quickly and start hitting people. So, that whole situation makes artisans sound really good. Problem is, they don't get strength that is unmodified by now. When you just have more elites than other people, also just have more net worth, probably. In a land-based system, very strong. In a net worth-based system, like most warring is, your artisan can be detriment. You've got more net worth, but not necessarily more power for that net. So if you're warring someone that's worth, but they're all warriors, they're going to be stronger than. So very strong, but has some drawbacks, at least in the war scene. Certainly able to make work. Paladin, minus 20% military casualties. Went over that sort of bonus in Undead. It helps. I don't think it's. This is just your support spellcaster, and it says access to all support spells. So that means you're going to have HI, which is a rarer support spell, but it's probably one of the strongest ones, I'd say, especially if you're tossing it on to, your Fireballed core, your big core, your humans. It's just crazy how much gold you can save. And then it's also quite effective for training times, especially at the high time. So if you're saving 3, 4 ticks of training time, how much of a bonus that can be. So I think having your paladins really be proactive on like HI for training, HI for high wage, quite strong. They've got that -1 mana cost for selfies, such as stuff. And they've got a 2 mana MA to spam. That's kind of cute. I don't think that I don't even think paladins are going to cast that ever for mana. But I think everyone should have 3 paladins in every kingdom. I think having more paladins is 3 or 4, 5 good for support casting. I don't think they're particularly strong if you're trying to run them as a core. I just think you want them in your kingdom. Now we've got our TMs. So before I go over all 3 of them, I think that your TM personalities are pretty strong in these proposed changes. All 3 of them have multiple buffs, like 3 major buffs each, whereas most of the core personalities only got like 1 or 2 buffs, and only one of them's kind of big. So Mystic, 100% guild effectiveness. That means you're getting twice the wizard production. It also means when you're casting self spells or offensive spells, you only need half the guilds. So in war as a mystic, you only need 20 or 10% guilds, and you can get your full duration spells. That's a huge bonus. 10% land in war builds, and then up to 40-50% land in pump builds. Huge land savings, lets you pump more wizards than anyone else. +1 mana recovery per tick, so that's 33% more spells that you're casting. That's a half extra offensive spell per tick. And then 25% spell duration as well. You're spending less on self spells because they last longer. Short duration spells benefit from this more because Chastity can actually bump from 5 ticks to 7 ticks, which is actually a 40% duration increase. So you're looking at, compared to a 3 mana Chastity caster getting a 5 tick, a 4 mana Chastity caster at 7 tick is getting, that's like 14 ticks of Chastity per tick versus 7.5. It's a twice as strong Chastity caster at base. And for just offensive spells in general, you're getting almost 200% duration coverage from Mystic, as opposed to any top of those guild savings and the Wizard Maker. Their spell list, very normal Mystic things, Showers, Chastity. They're also going to have to be your PF casters, which is fine. If you're only running bare bone Mystic count, you're complaining that you toss in a hybrid Mystic, or just have extra Mystics in your comp in general. They're very strong. Blizzard, you cast a few Blizzards here and there, not huge. Sloth, I use Sloth in the first War of the Age, and then never again, generally. I don't know if other people use Sloth very much, let me know. Magic Ward, I almost never use. It has uses that aren't terrible, just never get around to doing it. You chain a guy, you want to make his land less harder. You just cast it on people that you know are going to use their mana, waste their rune. It's a spell that's rune efficient in most situations, but it's not doing damage otherwise. If you can think of it as like a lightning does rune, almost always doing a lot more rune damage than it costs. But its real cost is the opportunity cost of not casting a more offensive damage spell. So Mystic, very strong. I think every race could play Mystic and be happy. Such as so many benefits. And as I'll talk about, don't find most core personalities overly strong. So when you have all these benefits from your TM personality, even if it doesn't straight up help you attack. Heretic, 50% spell rune cost, self spells and offensive spells. That's huge, all age long. It lets you do a lot more with a lot less. Even if you have no towers, you have to do half as much rune robbing to make things work. Offensive spells are suddenly flush rituals, nightmare wave, tornadoes, all a lot easier to do. Land lusts are not free. So huge buff one. Huge buff two, Mage's Fury. 25% offensive WPA, you can toggle that on and off. Makes it a little bit easier for people to cast spells on you. Your WPA is high enough as is. You're not eating a lot of spells. Occasionally you'll see a fireball run, get the occasional MS casts on you, but just in general, as a caster yourself, you're seeing a lot less heat, and the defensive point isn't really hurting you that much. Big buff number three, Mind Focus. 50% more wizard production. So unlike your guild effectiveness, that's not helping you in war at all, because you're not getting free guilds out of it, you're not saving space. But when you're pumping, you're getting 50% more guilds out of pump times. Helpful. Giant buff number, what is it? 2, 3, 4. Guile. I get the exact numbers, if it's 15 or 20%, but 20% more off damage and instant spell damage. So your fireballs are 20% better, your night strikes are 20% better, your robbing is better. It does cost you some of your mana, so try to cast Guile, once a day and do all your stuff at the start of it, at the end of it. You can keep it up all the time. It taxes you a little bit. It's not the end of the world. And save a little bit of mana by casting it less spells then. And then Nightmares. I think Nightmares is going to be very useful when you have a lot of attackers that are struggling for offense. Nightmares is really good when you need to chain people and can't multi-tap them. If we see rogues that are struggling to build a lot of elites, the Nightmare them. Especially if you have a Elf Heretic, you have 30% WPA, and then you've got Mage's Fury, that's over 60% WPA bonus, plus whatever your raw is. You're going to have a lot of WPA. You're going to have a lot of extra damage. You're going to be able to do so much with a Heretic. I think you can run a really strong Elf Heretic. I think you can be strong Fairy Heretic. I think I'm leaning Fairy for it. I think a Gnome Heretic's fine as well. I don't think my preferred Heretic's Gnome. I think my preferred Heretic's a Fairy. See? Fool's Gold can be invaluable. Ermine has its uses. AD is whatever. But crazy good Heretic. For Mystic as well, probably Fairy or Elf. For your Pure, I think I prefer more Fairies, but you probably want at least one Elf Mystic without that WPA. Rogue. Rogue's really good. 100% TD effect. Bland effects. That means if you have 10 TDs, it acts as if it has 20 TDs. It does not double the effectiveness of the TDs in terms of their input. That's a question people often have. There's a lot of ages where you'll see 75% or 50%. So 100% is the highest TD effect you ever see. A really strong bonus. Around about 20%, 25% TD. You're getting near max effect if you're at 100% beat. You really want max effect TD if you're doing Assassinate Wizards or Propaganda. You want near max effect TD just all the time for EPA. but mostly those minus losses. As a thief with high send ops, you really, really want money. So you can keep doing ops all war long. Then you've got big bonus 2, thievery effectiveness, and invis. These stack to be about 40%. You've got 40% more TPA, and invis is another stacking minus 20% losses. Just really good. That means if you're not max TD, you're still getting those minus losses in. Maybe your BE is shit, maybe you just don't have TD because you're out of war. Whatever it is, invis is a crazy good spell now. Since it got buffed, it's a single spells in the game. Then you've got stealth recovery, very standard for rogues. So in the race ages, it's usually been tied to halfling. So this is the first age in a while where we're seeing a very traditional, very strong, punch you in the face sort of rogue. And of course, access to all thievery operations. So rogue's very strong. 40% TPA with full TD effect, minus losses. That's a rogue's dream. There's really not much you can hope. The only thing your TMs are missing this age is revelations. I think we all learned to live without it. So I think your gnome is doing really good things as a rogue. Rogues, more than the other TMs, struggle with WPA and can really benefit from having as much guild time as possible. So running a gnome that is D-specs only, doesn't need to pump elites, they're going to have higher WPA, they're going to have more science, and they're probably going to have more defense overall as well. You're going to get hit less, there's less recovery time, you can go back to pumping. When you have that WPA, you bleed less honor, gain more honor. Once you have honor ranks as a rogue, everything sort of steamrolls. So I think a gnome is looking really happy at rogue. You can do a similar thing for elf because they have that WPA built in. I think fairy's a fine rogue, but I think they're just struggling a bit because they want those elites so badly, and the minus wizard losses doesn't really help your rogue that much because it's not really a WPA buff. But also, I think the rogue can be run on any attacker pretty well. When you have invis and the TPA built in, a lot of free TPA really helps hybrid attackers get things done 100% TD. It's just a lot more than you usually get out of the pick. So I think every single attacker can run a rogue and feel just as happy as pretty much any attacking personality. You're just missing out on that rev like you'd have in past age. Sage. I don't know what to think about Sage. I really like science buffs more than book buffs because really high books into your net worth offer less and less in terms of actual benefit. So you're gonna be a sage, you're gonna have max universities 8 out of 10 weeks of the age. You're gonna have double the books. You might have more than double. But no built-in benefit. No library bonus, there's no side effect bonus, there's no SI. And those multipliers really help stack with higher books. And you can get booked by learning. I've played ages where, I have a core that can learn really well and they have more than double the books of everyone. Good as this whole pick is. And they don't have any immunity to amnesia. So unless you have really good WPA, you can just get dumpstered in war with amnesia. You have no immunity or protection from learns other than that university land effect. Just gonna get learned. Lose more books because you have more books. People are gonna target you specifically when they So I think Sage, as is, very niche. I think most people won't do well with Sage. I think some people will do well, but it's not the sort of pick where you can just make it work. In some ages, Sage is just really strong. It's like incredibly average. And right now, I'd say it's quite below. Tactician. Tactician's interesting because it's got a bunch of little bonuses. One general, super strong when you have the offense, super strong when you're in the trenches, super strong with Nightmare. But I think it might be a bit weaker this age when you have less elites. You might be looking at more despecs on enemies. There's less kill stacking built in. So I think it's going to be harder to use that general without a Nightmare setup. If you are doing a Nightmare setup, I think it could be strong. Ambush protection. Don't really care for it. I think ambush is bad. I don't think you need ambush for land. If I ambush, it's because it's cheap and kill stuff. It's nice, not the world, not game. It's just, it's a good benefit. Might be attractive on those really low defense, like Dryad and Orc, just so they don't have 50%. They're still going to get pushed, though. They're still going to lose offense. It's basically going to come out to being the same as casting Anon. They're going to lose just a few of their acres. Plus 25% credits gained. I don't find this particularly strong in war. In my wars, nobody uses any credits because nobody has any soldiers because nobody has any peasants. So it's nice when you hit out a war. It's nice in early age wars. Nice when you want to pump a specific province, but not a huge benefit overall. Accurate espionage, on the other hand, is very strong. Strong in war, out of war, end of war ceasefire. It's strong all age long, just saving you thief after thief after thief after thief in every aspect of what you do. In a long war, you see all your attackers, they slowly, they drop down from 2 to 1. Really sad. Points and laughs. But if you're a tactician, you run 3 TPA. 3 days into war, you still have 3 TPA. And when someone tries to night strike you, it's hard. You have CS as well. It's really nice. Yeah, nothing stops attackers from getting a little bit and being chained and overpopping from bloating and TPA. But it saves a lot of thieves. It's not negligible. And in terms of quality of life as an attacker, it's one of my favorite bonuses. Because it's just expensive to build thieves, man. It's gonna save you gold for your pumps as well. Awesome. Says here in the last you can use the .ops command and see how many thieves you've lost in the last 999 hours. This year I've lost over 4,000, mostly on intel. A couple million gold I could have kept. And you know what? You can run just a couple, and that's really good for your just day-to-day intel when you need random SOTs and WPA calcs and OMs. You can use that stealth first. When you're actually in war, having a couple tacks isn't all of your intel, but a few tacticians will. Certainly lessen the load. And when they keep more thieves, they can get that intel easier. They spend less stealth doing it. CS. CS on attackers is nice, but not crazy good. My problem is that if I want to night strike somebody 50 times, which is the bulk of my stealth use. I strike you 50 times, and I strike someone else 50 times, and I strike someone else 50 times. I now have CS. All it really costs me is a couple MVs. So it costs me, 1, 2, 3, 4 spells every time I do 50 NSs. Not a huge deal. Mostly annoying for intel. It's annoying for your blanketing riots and robbing people. Really good spell when you're on PMs, or if you have eowcf, you can't be Mystic Vortex as easy. But CS is good at E defense, not good at defending against big leaf weight. The War Hero. 50% effects from honor, 10% honor gains on trad march, 10% combat gains. HI and War Spoils. War Spoils has niche uses. Won't really go over them. You can make it work. HI is a super good spell in war. Good spell for cutting down your training times. If you don't have paladins that can give it to you, that's a really nice bonus. I think people can overlook it a bit, but it's really one of the stronger self spells you can have. My issue with these bonuses for War Hero, I look down here at Warrior and I see 10% offense, and I go, when I have 10% more offense, I can do 10% more trad marches. Gets me 10% more honor and 10% more combat gains, but also kills more and lets me hit bigger people. So I generally, when I see bonuses like this, I just think, well, that's part of what offense does, so I'd rather just find offense. 50% effects from honor. We've had war heroes for most of Utopia, usually been a plus 100% effect, and it's always nice, but it's really rare that you see it take off. Every once in a while, you have a war hero, and it's Marquis or Count, and God, it's so good. War starts, it gets hit twice, and you're chained. Like, well, shucks. So, if you have only a couple war heroes, they won't keep honor because they just get targeted. If you have a lot of war heroes, you'll probably have a couple war heroes at any given time that have those honor bonuses. Kind of have to divide it across your kingdom. Even at Baron, that's going to give you like 5% off DPA. Yeah. Not huge, or at 5% off. 5% off. It's nice, but you have a lot of war heroes and you win a lot, and you win a lot really hard. You can get in a steamroll position where you become basically untouchable. That's your best case scenario. But the thing about all of these is none of them do anything on it. None of them make you hit harder, hit more, and more. The only thing they do is tangential. Like gains is you have to be able to hit people in order for the gains to be, and need honor for the honor to be. So it's hitting people more is almost always better an instant than hitting people harder. And it's bad words because I'll usually try hitting people harder, having more, but hopefully you understand that. War Hero, I think it needs a little something. When you look at these benefits compared to your TM benefits, I think they compare. I think the TM benefits are so much better. Warrior, 10% OME. That's good. Just flat good. It's offense. Attacker, your main goal at any time is to have offense. So this does that well. Mercenary prisoner offense doesn't even register for me. I've never noticed it once, no matter how many times I've had it. but it's there. It is a real buff. It's just the draft costs. Draft costs is nice. It's better when you're drafting faster. You're not doing anymore. So people are going to be drafting less. So the draft costs matters less, I guess. Something like that's true. Yeah, this saves you 25 gold on everything. Comes out to quite a few hundred gold per acre every end of war ceasefire, and it saves you a bit of gold just all age long. It's a nice little economic buff. It's nothing crazy. Good. Reflect Magic. Reflect Magic's another spell that really benefits when you have more WPA. Have a lot of WPA, and it's hard to vortex it away, which means it's always active and it's always hitting you, similar to how CS is. It's also nice the more of them you have, because you can't just say, oh, these guys have reflect, we can avoid them, target them. The more reflect magic you have, the harder it is to deal with, the more all of your TMs are suffering dealing with it. So I like the idea of a warrior, especially on provinces like avians, gnomes, and undead, all of which I think I can get a lot of wizards on, and I can utilize the wizards on. A lot of wizards on avian with birth rate and reflect magic, they're going to get really annoying. They're going to be really hard to keep that economy down. And I just expect to have a lot of wizards on them well, so that reflect magic. And, that's just on top of having offense. Everyone likes it. So Warrior's my favorite pick of the attacking personalities, and I think the more of them you have, a bigger benefit it is because of reflect and because of offense. I think Artisan and Sage are a bit weaker. Come around a little bit on Artisan because of that tree of gold and just doing a bit of thinking on it, but oftentimes if you have too many elites, it just means someone's not going to. Tactician and War Hero, I both like them. I like Tactician, all those bonuses. Feels nice, but I think we need to see buffs attacking get in line with our EM personalities, or we need to see a nerf on these. So Mystic, I think, could lose one of these two. Still get picked on 40% of provinces. I think Heretic could lose. Mage's Fury, Mind Focus, Guile, and still get picked plenty. I think Rogue could probably lose just the Diva free effectiveness there. I think it's still going to keep Invis because there's no racial spells this age. So far, if you didn't notice, none of the races have spells. So I think Invis is going to stay on Rogue no matter what. I think maybe it could just lose that TP effectiveness or a couple TD. I think Rogue isn't the biggest offender. I think it's mostly these overload. So that's all the personalities. Then I might go back and talk about having a balance of rituals. I think what I'll do, maybe a second video where I go over kingdom setups and specific picks that I might like. So go over quite a few different PMs and cores that I like, how I might use them in tandem, what a few different full kingdom setups would look like, mostly focusing on attacking. That's just something I do. I'll share. Maybe I'll wait until revised or finals to post something like that. It's gonna take a long time to get useless, but yeah. If you stuck it out this long, thanks for listening. And this will be the first episode Miles rant. Didn't actually rant about anything. I'll get spicy in the future, I promise.